Okay, hi Sondra. So chord stuff. Sorry, I'm just having a wee. Okay. Some basic concepts we kind of need to get over before we jump into the chords would be starting off with the chromatic scale. So you wrote that down somewhere. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. If we take those, we could apply that to any string. So if we pick a string, that string's E, right? So E, we start at the E on that chart. E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. All right, now we can do that on any string. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. D, D sharp, E, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D. So that's one way of finding every note on your guitar, which is fairly handy for a lot of different tasks. And it's also a fairly pivotal and important piece of information the further we go, especially when we start talking about moving chords around. So you've got to get familiar with your chromatic scale. A couple of interesting things about that we need to think about. The word sharp means go up one fret. So if we play F sharp is one fret higher than F, right? That does mean sometimes we get weird explanations of things, like F double sharp would be 2 frets higher than F. F sharp sharp, that one. Now F double sharp is G. Sometimes in music there's a good reason for not calling something the note it is and calling it by something else. Don't worry about the particulars about that. That makes more sense the more you confront that kind of thing in the real world. For now, just remember that sharp means go up a fret, double sharp would be go up 2 frets, triple sharp would go up 3 frets. Doubles and triples and things are far less common than just the regular 1 sharp. Flat is the opposite. Flat means go down. So if this is F flat would be this note. I know on the scale we wrote out there is no such thing as F flat. F flat is E. Yet again, sometimes there would be a good reason to call E F flat. It really depends on what else has been written in that bar. Don't worry about it too much. Sharp is go up, flat is go down. Try to figure out the normal names of your notes like E, F, F sharp, G, G, G flat, F, E, E flat. And very slowly over time start memorizing your fingerboard. A really, really, really good idea to start with in terms of memorization of notes on the neck would be to memorize the dot locations on the bottom 2 strings. E, G, A, B, C sharp, E. The sooner you've got that memorized, the sooner, the easier it would be for you to find other chords. So anything that is an E-shaped chord, right? And when we do it as a bar chord, remember we make it with the other 3 fingers. And this bar is resting here behind the nut to symbolize that when I move it onto the neck, it would be like that, and actually be a finger that pushes down, right? Because these open strings are held down for us by the nut, we don't need to have that finger there, but it's important for us to know that that's what the shape is going to be once we start moving around. Okay, so I know E, right? What if I needed to make a C chord? Well, what I could do is move this E up until it becomes C, right? Now I could do that chromatically, E, F, F sharp, G. Or if we've memorized our notes, G, A, B, C sharp, E, the dot locations, C sharp must be really close, right? B must be really close. So I can either come up from B or down from C sharp. So here was B. If I go up 1, that would be C. So if I take this chord shape, here it is at B, but I wanted C, so I move up 1 more. Here's C. The other way of finding it would be to start on C sharp and move back to find C. What if I want to find G sharp? Well, it goes E, G. So there's G. G sharp must be 1 higher. G sharp just means 1 fret higher than G. There we go, here's a G sharp chord. So that actually means that with this one chord shape, I know all the major chords. E, F sharp. Sorry, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. Now, if I've played every single letter in that chromatic scale, I have played all the chords of that type. So technically, you wouldn't need any other major chord. It wouldn't be the most efficient way of playing because it's going to require us to hop around the neck a great deal. It won't even be the best sounding way of playing, but it is a way of playing. And at this stage, that's not bad. You know, so if you think of a song like a great number of songs are going to use chords 1, 4, and 5 in the key, so G, C, D. Here's my E shape, so I need G, I need C, now that could be B upper fret, and D, well D would be like C sharp upper fret. So it'd be like, alright, there's a song. Wild Thing specifically, or La Bamba, or any other song that uses that kind of progression. So we can play that way, right? And as a beginner, that's really nice to do a little bit of that. It's not very practical. It is very hard as a beginner to make these jumps really accurately, because moving our forearm on the neck is a bit of a liability until we train it a whole bunch. This gross motor movement is far less accurate than fine motor movement. So whenever we have to make these big leaps, especially as a beginner, there's quite a high chance that we're not going to quite get it right. And when we do that, we sacrifice other things. So we might say slide from here to here, but I've done something weird with my shoulder and my arm and my thumb's way back here. I've just made the chord, but I'm not in a good playing position. And these are the kind of mistakes we would experience as a beginner. So there is one little problem here. And that little problem is that most songs, if they're not just going to use 3 chords, if they're not just going to use chords 1, 4, and 5, are probably also going to use minor chords. So the first thing that we need to confront is, how do I make a major chord into a minor chord? And here we hit the next piece of theory we need to use. Major chords are made up of, yeah, this is one of those lies you tell your kids moment where it's like, actually there are multiple major chords in a key, so this isn't the only way of making a major chord. But the way that everyone learns first to make a major chord is you take the first note of the scale, the third note of the scale, and the 5th note of the scale. So in this instance, it would be a major scale. We're trying to make a major chord. The difference between major and minor is that a major chord would be made of 1, 3, and 5, and a minor chord would be made of 1 flat 3 and 5. Now, if you knew your E major scale fluently, this would be a very simple task. You could just find the G sharp and move it. But as of yet, you probably don't know any scales or many of the notes on the neck. So the best thing for you to do would actually be to memorize another pattern. Would be to memorize the pattern of notes, the order of 1s, 3s, and 5s in the E chord. All right. Now, if you do that, you can then start learning how to move them around to make other chord types, of which there are 5 basic chord types, and then another 4 or 5 or 6 numbers that we could add, or combinations of those numbers. So what we now need to do is memorize the order of intervals, the scale degrees in the chord. So if we hold down an E chord, that order of notes goes 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. That again. 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. That means that the low E string, the high E string, and the D string are all playing the same note. These are all different E's. Right? Now, they're all spread an octave apart. This is 1 octave, that's another octave, so between there and there is 2 octaves. But they all sit with each other perfectly. That's the sound of an octave. Right? That means that each of those are double, going this way, double the frequency of the last note, going this way, half the frequency of the last note. Okay, that also means that the A string and the B string are playing the same note. Yet again, separated by an octave. So the only string we have left, right, is the G sharp here on the G string. That's our third, right? So to recap again, the 1s, the E string, the D string, and the high E string, they're all the 1s. The 5s are the A string and the B string, and the only third is on the G string. So if we cycle back, major was 1, 3, 5, minor was 1, flat 3, 5. So if we take this 3 and we flatten it, flatten means move down 1 fret, so if we move down 1 fret, it goes to open. This is now E minor. 0, 2, 2, 0, 0, 0. Now the order of notes has not changed. 1, 5, 1, 3, in this case flat 3, 3, 5, 1. That's our intervallic pattern of this shape. So now we can make minor chords all over the neck, like G minor. So, okay, here's E minor. What was our first step? We have to refinger the chord. So we've got this finger free and easy to available here. Now we could do this, but for beginners it's very hard to maintain this fret gap in between those two fingers. So it's going to be a lot easier if we refinger with our pinky and ring. And then we move that up. E, F minor, F sharp minor, G minor, G sharp minor, A minor, A sharp minor, B minor, right? Notice that no matter where I move that shape, if it was a minor chord somewhere, it's going to stay a minor chord when I move it. If it was a major chord somewhere, it's going to stay a major chord when I move it, right? The shape is determining what it is. Where you place it determines what particular note we call it, right? So this is a minor chord shape. No matter where I move this, it's always going to be a minor chord. So I'm just trying to get that middle finger out of the way. It's really hard on the camera for you to see that middle finger's not doing anything. And I don't want to encourage you to do this like lie it down on top thing that most beginners do. I certainly had a bad habit with that when I was young. So this middle finger is not touching, right? So no matter where I move this shape, Phantom of the Opera, right? No matter where I move this shape, it's always going to be a minor chord. If it's the major shape with that other finger on, no matter where I move it, it's always going to be a major chord. What major chord is, where is this finger? What is the bottom note, right? We could actually determine off any of the ones, but the easiest way of thinking about it to start is either what's on the bottom or what's on the very top. Usually what's on the bottom. Right, so a normal song, many songs would have probably something like a 1, 6, 4, 5 progression. That would be the first chord in the key, the fourth chord in the key, the sixth chord in the key, and the fifth chord in the key. Now, 1, 4, and 5 in any key are major, and 6 is minor. So you can see already, for the 4 most commonly used chords in pop music, we need a mix. There's going to be 3 major chords and 1 minor chord. So if we map that out, we could do something in the key of E. 1, 4 would be here as an A chord, 5 would be here as a B chord, and 6 would be here as a C sharp minor. Right? Now a lot of songs would do something like 1, 5, 6, 4. Or other things like 1, 6, 4, 5. After we've done all this, after we've played a bit of songs, now with those 2 bits of information, with major chords and minor chords of the same shape, and knowing all of those notes coming up and down, or at least being able to figure them out fairly quickly by memorizing the dot locations, and then using a bit of quick maths, C, I want a D, C is very close to D, I'll move up, all right? Then there's no song you can't play with that set of chords, just the E major and the E minor. It won't be very practical. It might not even sound the best, but you could do it, and it would be a good way of you starting to learn some things about the neck and getting used to this idea of these 2 shapes moving around. Very quickly. That can be a little frustrating because there's going to be all these big jumps and they won't quite sound like a lot of the songs you've been listening to. Very quickly we realized that actually most good songs on the guitar alternate between 2 types of shapes, E shapes and A shapes. So if we learnt the A shapes the same way as well, then we'd be able to play pretty much all of your Beatles, all of your Eagles, all of your big hit pop numbers really reliably in the way that most people will play them. So, the same work on the A chord. A. The pattern of notes. Remember, we're going to start with the degrees, right? The scale degrees of 1, 3, and 5. So this is going to go 5, 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 5, 1, 5, 1, 3, 5. 5, 1, 5, 1, 3, 5. Okay, Yet again, there's only one 3, which is very, very useful for us, because now if we want to make this A minor, this is A major, what we need to do to make this A minor is take the 3 and move it back a fret. Alright, now we have A minor. If we combine that information again, so we might say go A to a D chord. We could start playing some music. Now, if we thought about that, A, D, and E. Well, the problem here is that the A is a long way around, right? Like the A, the D, and the E, they're pretty close to each other. That's okay. This A to this D, that's a bit of a leap. So what people would normally do is they might use an E shape here. If we go E, F, F sharp G, G sharp A, A is right here. So that would go A, and that makes everything much closer together, much smaller quantity of hand movement. So we now have a whole bunch of information we could use. So like we could go A, D, E. Right, we could go A, D, E. We could go A, we could go A, D, E, up here. Right, so we can mix and match these things until we find both the comfort we want in terms of how close everything is together and the sound that we want. And it's usually going to be a blend of either 2 on the low E and 1 on the A, or the other way around. These kind of patterns, right? Very soon after this point, we start realizing that there are always going to be set patterns we work in. And I don't expect you to memorize any of this right now, but if we were talking about those chords 1, 4, and 5 again, which are the most commonly used chord sequence in Western music, that comes in essentially 2 flavors. We have a flavor like this, E shape, A shape, A shape, or we have another one that's like this, E shape, A shape, A shape, E shape, E shape. Now that's the same chords. E, A, B. E, A, B. But they sound quite different to one another in the way they make you feel, more in the way that they sound. Right? Because we could sing the same thing again. And they sound the same, right? Functionally, they are the same thing, but they don't feel the same. They have a kind of a different ring to our ears, and this is where we start getting into which sets of these chords we learn. Those patterns of, say, 1, 4, and 5, and eventually longer patterns, including the rest of the 7 numbers, are actually the most important thing to memorize, because once we start memorizing that, we'll also start memorizing the sound, and it becomes a thing where it's much easier for us to pick up sounds we hear just by listening to them, or chord progressions we hear just by listening to them. So a recap, the chromatic scale. The chromatic scale lets us find any note on the fretboard. It also allows us to move things we know around. So if we have anything, a pattern on the fingerboard that we know as something, we could move it now and make it into a different kind of that same thing, a different letter of that same thing. For example, if we had a G major scale, that G major scale is a pattern of fingers, middle finger, pinky, pointer finger, middle finger, pinky, pointer finger, ring finger, pinky. G major. If I take that whole pattern and I move it up 1 fret, it's going to be G sharp major scale. The fingerings have stayed the same, I'm just starting 1 fret higher. If I go up again, it'll be the A major scale. We could also do this with chords. Here is a C chord. Now, remember there's a whole bunch of open strings that I'm going to make into a bar. If I move this up 1 fret, it is a C sharp chord, it is a D chord, it is a D sharp chord, it is an E chord. Right? So any pattern we have on the guitar can be transposed chromatically to make it into a different thing of the same letter. The same thing of a different letter. So if we start with a major scale, it will always be a major scale, but it will be either, we might start on G major and we could move it until it becomes any other kind of major scale, A major, B flat major, whatever we want. Now we can also do that with chords. If we take an E chord, we could move that around the neck chromatically. E, F, F sharp G, G sharp A sharp B, right? We know all of our shapes, and that lets us know all of the possible names of the E-shaped chords. I mean, it's all the possible names of any major chord. We could also do that with an A chord. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, right? Move that around. Then, the last and potentially most valuable thing here as well is knowing the intervals inside of your chord. So if we know what scale degree is in each part of the chord, we could then move them to make them other types of chords. The further and further you go, the more you're going to see lots of numbers attached to chords. And the easiest way of you adding some of those numbers in is to know a couple of bits of theory data that let you go, oh, I want a 6. A 6 is going to be above 5 by a certain amount. I want a flat 7. A flat 7 is going to be above 5 or below 1 by a certain amount. It's all about patterns on the guitar, right? For other instruments, you might care more about what notes they are. And while that is an important thing, you should memorize notes around the neck. It's nowhere near as important as knowing the patterns on the neck. So in this instance, we covered both the E major chord and the A major chord. The E major chord's intervallic pattern goes 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. The A major intervallic pattern is 5, 1, 5, 1, 3, 5. If we find those threes, in this instance on the B string, and lower it, we'll make a minor chord. Now you probably already know those chord shapes, but you should know why they are those chord shapes, and that is why. Hope it helps.